Hey, this is Steve in Dallas, Texas. It's Saturday morning, my friend, and you are listening to Light Talk.
Good morning. This is Zach coming to you from Washington, D.C. And today we will be discussing what's in your contract. Can I still buy tungsten lekos? How do you read a script? What is neutral density gel? And how do I keep up with technology? All on Light Talk.
And this is David coming to you from the beautiful Belmont Shore neighborhood of Long Beach, California. And if you don't already know, you are listening to Light Talk, and we are the Lumen Brothers. That's right. We've got Steve, myself, me, and Zach. Zach is back with us. Good to have you back, my brother. Now, you've been AWOL at some weird conference, right? For a few weeks?
Yes, I was at the USITT Digital Media Symposium in conjunction with the Luma Festival in lovely Binghamton, New York.
Luma Festival.
Do they have a T-shirt that says that on it?
It's a lot of work.
It would be a very big T-shirt to say all of that. Well, the Luma Festival is actually a really cool thing where they close off downtown Binghamton, which has a lot of really interesting older buildings. And they invite a bunch of artists to come and projection map on those buildings. And actually, one of the most interesting things this year was they had somebody who projection mapped a parking garage. So it was really neat stuff. You know, it's interesting to see what happens when you like hand these artists a bunch of complementary tools to work with and just sort of say, go crazy and create something. Don't worry about telling a story. Just make something beautiful. And they really did.
That's wonderful. Did you do anything on it?
I did not participate in the Luma Festival portion, but I did share some of my design concepts and theories that I apply from my musical training in the Digital Media Symposium, which was also held at the same time. They invited a bunch of different artists and technicians from around the country to come and speak to students and festival attendees. They had some people from the various media server companies were there. Some folks from some of the system integrator and rental shops were there, and they were all talking about, how things get done and how we do what we do.
That's cool. And you're going to do sort of the same thing at LDI, is that correct?
At LDI, I'm actually hosting a couple of days worth of discussions about projection mapping. I'm going to share a panel with one of our friends from Disney, Casey Wilkerson, who we had on the show last year. Yeah. We're going to talk about not just how to projection map on a building or on a surface, but what you need to do before you even decide to projection map to be prepared for that, and what's going to be great about that is that a lot of people ask me all the time, like, how do I prepare my client who says I want a projection map on my building? How do I let them know that it's not just like I go design stuff on my computer, but that what I have to do to actually get a 3D model of their building? How do I do that? So it'll be an interesting discussion. There's also going to be a couple of classes on like basics of programming with QLab. And for those of you out there who are QLab users, QLab 5 was just released last week. So that's very exciting. Hopefully we're going to get into the details of some of the new features. And who knows what else will happen at LDI.
Wow. Now, what days are those going to be? Do you know the schedule yet?
Those are going to be on Friday and Saturday.
Oh, what time?
I'm not sure.
Is that going to conflict with your, Lumen Brothers?
Well, considering that our sister is in charge of the scheduling, I believe that she made sure that nothing will conflict.
That's right, because I believe we are at the tail end of the entire conference.
Right, we are the 11 o'clock number.
We are the grand
LDI.
Finale of LDI.
The tail that wags the dog.
Rose's turn.
The tail that wags the dogs, exactly. So, yeah, because we go on at 4, so we better have a bar in there. That's all I have to say. But we'll talk to
Well, 4 o'clock is in Vegas is
I know.
2 a.m.
It's nap time. That's what it is. That's when we go out at night. Anyway, well, that's great news, and welcome back. It's great to have you on the show again. So before we get started, for people who are regular listeners of the show, and you've been listening for the past 2 or 3 episodes, you realize that we've been having a problem with our legal team. Flecked, flocked, flare, and glare. It's been unfortunately made public. Thank God no charges were pressed, but the upshot of it is that we've lost our old legal team. And for this week, we've been left unprotected. However, a good thing actually came out of it because their paralegal, Snoot, just passed her bar, and they recommended that we actually hire her team to represent us. Now, considering that this whole mishigash began with the problem with Snoot, actually it was a problem with Stan calling Snoot little, to be exact, which Stan did apologize for, absolutely. And Snoot accepted his apology. Our old team decided that was just too much, and they said, why don't you just hire Snoot? So it was my job last weekend to actually propose this to Snoot, and we actually talked about this on the show. And Lori and me decided to take a trip up the coast to pick up Three Dog Night's Mellotron, which is a whole nother story. But we were heading up north, right? And I asked Snoot if she would like to join Lori and me, and Snoot said, absolutely, it sounds like fun. You know, traveling up the I-5 in the Central Coast, why not? So Snoot accompanied Lori and me, and we drove up all the way up to Davis, actually. We found a nice hotel, and let's just say that the conversation started out a little tense, as Snoot is...
Is this turning into another After Dark episode?
It started out a little tense because, you know, Snoot's still feeling the sting of Stan's words. But after I convinced her that she did not have to work with Stan anymore, and after a really nice dinner and a few drinks, and of course, some yada, 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 the Snoot Group with partners Sparks, Burnout, and Chase Esquire is now on board. We got them. We got them. So they are our new legal representations, and now we don't have to worry anymore about litigation. Well, no.
The audience can't see it, but I'm wiping the sweat from my brow now.
Let me just say it was not easy. But all that being said, the deal is a little bit convoluted, okay? Because besides not having to deal with Stan, we now have to offer the Snoot Group unlimited commercials on our show. The first one is today. So there you go. The Snoot Group. Snoot Goldberg is now our head attorney of Sparks, Burnout, Chase, Esquire. That is great. Okay? So, whew, that's it. Steve has the first question of the day.
I'm just kind of letting all that wash over me there. That's a lot of information
It's a lot.
to pack in.
Hey, let's just say that Lori and I took one for the team. All right?
Lori, you and the Mellotron.
No, the Mellotron was in the van.
Have you plugged it in? Have you plugged the Mellotron in and played
Not
it?
yet. I have not plugged it in because it's... I have to really check out the electronics before I plug it in.
You don't have to. You have a lawyer now.
Yeah, I may burn down the place.
Well, I would like to know if when you turn it on, if it just automatically launches into the Three Dog Night set on its own.
I don't think it has that technology in it. That would be great, though. This thing was built in 1972.
Do you know the famous story of Rick Wakeman with his Mellotron playing for David Bowie?
Yes, he burned him. He hated him.
Yeah, but
he
said
used them
that,
all the time, but he hated them.
Yeah, he always said he was the only one who knew how to keep it in tune, and that's how he got the gigs.
You're right. He was the only one who kept it in tune, who knew how to. And the funny thing is that it's just a little dial right in the center of the machine. It's not like it's hidden or anything like that. And it happens to say pitch on it. So if you couldn't figure that out, these other keyboard players are morons. That's all I have to say.
Pitch? I don't need that.
All right, so let's get on with the show. Steve has our first question.
Yes, it comes from Charlotte in Oregon, and she writes, do any companies still produce a tungsten fixture for the stage? It seems last week that you suggested that only LED is being specified in new construction. Not I, Charlotte. That was Stan.
He's not here today.
who said that. So I thought, I did a little research this morning, and I went to the website of ETC and to Altman and to Verilight, and all three heavy hitters still have a tungsten fixture proudly displayed there for sale on their website. And of course, Mole Richardson still makes the most incredible tungsten Fresnels out there. So no, I don't think LED is the only thing being specified for theaters. I think it probably has a lion's share for a wide variety of reasons that we discussed last week. But tungsten seems to be hanging on. Time will tell. We will see what happens with the Department of Energy's pronouncement that 2023 was the big year that they were going after tungsten. So we'll see. Well, I'll when I see it, I will believe it. So I think tungsten is with us for at least another year.
Well, let me ask you this then. So let's say Department of Energy aside, what scenarios do you think you would see yourself speccing a tungsten fixture over an LED fixture?
Well, that's a different question altogether. I don't know that if I'm doing new construction, when I think of new construction, I think a lot about the educational system rather than a new regional theater. And I think educational systems are going to be all over this for all the reasons, whether it comes from energy or longevity. I think Stan had a point last week. I think high schools, middle schools are going to have shifted to LED. I don't know. I mean, I like the warmth. I like what tungsten does, but I just don't think it has a viable future anymore. I really don't. I love my drafting table and I love my Black Warrior #2 pencil, but I think that is more of a hobby for me than using AutoCAD or Vectorworks. I think the future is there. Things change, things get better. I'm sure people said the same thing when those old strand kind of bottle lekos with the T12 lamp were replaced by tungsten, and people were going, "Oh my goodness, we'll never get that kind of light ever again. Please don't throw them away." Things change. I guess I could see tungsten having use in a photography studio, 1 or 2 fixtures in there. I think I could see it having use on movie sets. Again, I think it's a small percentage of fixtures on location. It's just not as flexible as an LED fixture. It is not as robust as an LED fixture. So I don't know that I would spec it. I think I would have to think long and hard about that. Probably the only reason it would be spec'd is if that was the only thing the budget could support. But then there need to be an argument that maybe you need to buy less fixtures and an LED fixture.
I predict that tungsten will be the mellotron of lights.
Well, I would guess that much like the mellotron, that what will determine the lifespan of these fixtures is how long you can still get them serviced. At a certain point, there are fewer and fewer people willing to service them. There'll be less parts available for them. They'll become a finite amount, and eventually it won't be a question of the quality of light. It'll just be a question of I can't get the parts.
You're right, Zach. There's going to be a time when they're going to stop making lamps for these things. Last week, Steve said that you can't get lamps for VL5s anymore. You can't get MR16s anymore.
Well, I will say to all the listeners out there, much like what we've seen in the photography world, where there's been a resurgence with film from all these little homebrew guys throughout the country developing, no pun intended, their own stuff. Maybe some, kid in Seattle will start a little boutique lamp company and he'll make his own lamps, custom order.
All right. Jack in Hong Kong writes, how do you analyze a script to create a design? Okay, so I don't think there's one way of doing it. There are many ways of doing it. I have my own personal way of doing it because of how I was taught and also because of my musical background. The one thing I always tell my students to ask is, why is it important for me to do this play? And that is really the key, because that's where you start getting a connection with the play. It's important I'm doing this play because I believe that we're at a crisis right now when it comes to women's rights and women's choices, right? And no matter how I feel about it, that's how I feel about it. And that's why I want to do that play. That's important, right? From then on, then it's a matter of having that personal connection with the play. And that's what it's called, a point of view. And that will drive you through the entire process of the play. How do you analyze the script? Well, that's next. You look at the script. in its entire form, how it's broken down by scenes, where the transitions, where the climaxes are, where the dramatic moments are, all of that. All this is very, very important. You break it down that way, and I call that a design score. I break it down by scene, and I break it down by physical moments and also dramatic moments. And then I'll break it down by transitions, going from one to another, one scene to another. And then I connect it all with music. And that's just my own personal way of doing it, because a score of a play is just like a score of a song. Like music, plays happen over time. And so the movement of the lighting and the atmospheres will change as the play progresses over time, because you're telling a story with the lighting as well.
I think that, what you said is spot on. And I was taking notes because I want to apply some of those to my next attempt. I think part of what I end up doing, because my role often involves imagery of some sort, is in combination with listening to music if there's music, the style of dialogue if there's dialogue, and discussions with the director and or scenic and lighting designers. There's the idea of trying to figure out what is like the style that we want to do with our imagery for this. Is it something that's going to be colorful, black and white, abstract, photorealistic, painterly? So like very similar to what you were talking about breaking down the script into sections, especially transitions, which is often where projections occur. There's the idea of using the script and its methods of storytelling to try to help inform what kind of stylization there's going to be in the visual storytelling of it. And then later on, we'll create some kind of storyboard companion that goes with the script. Especially if it's a musical, for me, it's very easy to just kind of go through and figure out where the projections will occur. And I'll just sit there with Post-it notes and mark it almost like a stage manager might. But there's that level of analysis where you're really trying to figure out, in terms of my storytelling, how am I breaking this down visually? Like, what do I want to look like that I'll try to figure out? And it's a conversation, you may start in one place and then, as you discuss with your creative team, you may end up arriving somewhere else. We've even talked on the show about this idea that like you start tech with one design philosophy, and by the time you get to Act 2, you've completely changed your approach, and then you want to go back to Act 1 and bring it to where you are in Act 2 now. So, it's almost like you're going at it from different angles at the same time.
Well, I think the thing about the script is you have to keep asking yourself why there's a light cue there. Why am I changing cues? You see this more in dance maybe than you do in a theater piece. A lot of times you'll see a young designer simply changing the lights on every other musical note. And the question is, why are you doing that? They can be lovely cues. They can just be beautiful light cues, but they can also be incredibly distracting because there's no reason for the light to change. There's nothing that has the character's objective has not been obtained. There's no information coming forward. They haven't changed the location. It's just you feel you're not earning your money, so you put a few extra light cues in. I think the thing about the script is it keeps reminding you that you're not paid by the cue. You are paid to tell the story.
Larry in Northport writes, "It seems like the hardware and software for projection design is constantly changing. There's always something new. How do you keep up with what's going on?" That is a great question. And I think actually earlier in the show, as I referred to QLab 5 coming out, that a really good way is to attend some of these seminars and trade shows where you see manufacturers putting out their new stuff and demonstrating it. There's a lot of great online resources like Live Design Online and other publications that have websites where often the manufacturers will send out a press release when there's something new and newsworthy. And at this point now, we're at the point where everybody's got a website. So not only can you extract this information from various manufacturers' websites, but often if you go to the websites of some of your favorite designers, they may talk about the equipment that they're into and what they're looking forward to and things like that. And YouTube, I said YouTube University earlier, but it's real. Almost anything you want to know something about, there's probably a couple hundred videos on YouTube, whether it's how to do something, how to use a piece of software, how to use a piece of hardware, what's coming soon, what do we want to see in the future, what did they use in the 60s? You can probably find anything you're looking for on YouTube. So really take advantage of all those resources. And if you're in school, you could take advantage of your classmates and your professors as well, because, we're all in this together. And a lot of this is word of mouth as well. How about you guys? How do you keep up with the ever-evolving world of theatrical technology?
Well, it's the same thing you just said, really. I mean, we all go to trade shows and, check out what's on Live Design Online. There's always blurbs coming out from them, which is great. And also, like Martin today is having a full-day symposium in their LA offices, where they've invited me to come down to look at the equipment, all their new equipment. Unfortunately, I can't make it today, which kind of sucks because I got to focus this afternoon. But yeah, it's that's how you do it. And you live in a large city, it's great. If you don't, you see a lot of demos on video, but unfortunately, video can be really tricky. It can hide a lot of things. First of all, you don't know how bright a light really is on video. You can't see everything about that light, the quality of the light on video. You really need to see it in real life. The other way you could do it is that if you're doing a big show and there's a chance you're going to be speccing these lights, the manufacturer may send you a light, just to borrow it and to see it and set it up in your light lab. So that's another way of doing it.
Well, certainly on that demo video, they're not going to show you the problems
Absolutely,
the light has.
Or how loud it is,
Exactly.
All these little things that you can only judge for yourself when you're in a room, and you get up close to the light as it's moving. These are things I look at how fast the light is. I look at, how if the light's zooming, what it looks like through the zoom travel. That's very important because sometimes you have effects where you're doing a live zoom. At least I do, kind of like that. But, and you want to look at your, all the bells and whistles and how they work and that things aren't clunky. And also you want to have the light, set at 3200 Kelvin. And you stand in front of it and you put your hand up and you look at it. And you see, does this look like flesh tone to me? That's something I always do for every light. It's just really important. And believe me, some of them you can tell that they don't look anywhere close to flesh tones. So those are the ones that that you're going to be using for side light and backlight effects.
Or just not using.
Or just not use at all because there are enough lights out there that get close.
I think a really good way is to listen to Light Talk.
Yes, exactly. Listen to us. We know what we're talking about.
You are listening to Light Talk, and today Light Talk is sponsored by
the Snoot Group with partners Sparks, Burnout, and Chase Esquire.
Are you having horrible problems with your producer? Has he refused to pay your design fee, even though you hung, focused, cued, and even struck the lighting equipment? All this while babysitting his spoiled 6-year-old kid and incontinent mother-in-law. Don't you realize that this jerk is taking advantage of your goodwill? It may be time for you to take it up a notch and find a law firm who is as mean as theater producers. And we are talking rabid mean. 9 out of 10 convicted theater producers agree that there is no one meaner than the Snoot Group. That's right. The Snoot Group, with partners Sparks, Burnout, and Chase Esquire, will not only bury that producer in tons of litigation, they will make him bleed and beg forgiveness for being a total a-hole to everyone on the production, including the starving actors who have not been paid their weekly salary and have resorted to eating the 3-week-old prop food to stay alive. Do what the Lumen Brothers do and allow the Snoot Group to protect you from frivolous lawsuits from patrons who somehow got in the way of that falling light and at the same time pry the money out of those cheap shyster producers' pockets. And don't forget, you have Snoot on your side.
This is Snoot Goldberg Esquire. Don't with me.
The Snoot Group, protecting you and the Lumen Brothers for the past 26 minutes.
And now, back to Light Talk.
Well, the sound of those rabid monkeys prancing about the studio tells us that once again it's time for Let's Talk About. And today's Let's Talk About is all about how does it feel to get screwed? And what are you going to do about it? I don't know.
Hey.
Okay, well, something happened this past week that really kind of freaked me out, but unfortunately I'm not surprised. And it's about how nasty administrators and heads of companies can be. It has to do with a very large opera company out of Chicago called the Lyric Opera of Chicago, which is probably one of the 3 largest opera companies in North America. You've got the Met, you've got the Lyric, and you've got San Francisco Opera. Those like the 3 leading ones. There are other great ones as well, don't get me wrong. But those are the ones people usually think of when you're working at the top. And I've had the pleasure to actually work for the Lyric. I actually did 3 shows for them. 2 of them were premieres, I believe. Yeah, 2 of them were new productions. Well, a director who I work with now, Jose Maria Condemi, he's a great director. I just did a show with him last summer. He did a new production of Ernani back about 10 years ago for the Lyric. They were going to build this new production. They hired him, and they hired all the designers he wanted to work on the show, which is how it normally works. They did the production, and the production was a hit, went over very well. And then a few years later, they said they were going to move that production to the San Francisco Opera. So he was on board for that. And then COVID hit. So that show was canceled in San Francisco, which was unfortunate. A few years pass, and in January, he gets notified by the company that they were going to open this season at the Lyric with that production. However, they were not going to use him as director. And he was surprised because everyone knows that when you sign a contract with a company, certainly any company, but certainly one of this stature, you will have a right of first refusal clause in it. And what a right of first refusal is, basically states, is that if that show is remounted by the same company or it is sold or rented to another company, that they must give you, the artist, and the owner of that intellectual property, by the way, the first right of refusal to do it. So you can either do it and get paid another fee, or you can say, no, I can't do it, or I'll send my assistant there to do it, and then the fee structure changes, but still your production. And it was his production. He worked on this production. He came up with the designs with the designers. He was a major influence in this show. I know when I do a show, I consider the director as almost a co-lighting designer, really. That's how I like working with directors. So it's part of his production, okay? It is. Well, they said that his agent made an error in this clause, and instead of saying that he would have the right of first refusal for any subsequent remounts of this production at the originating theater, that it was only for if the show was moved to another theater or another company. Now, even if that is true, this has been the practice of professional theater, especially of this level, for decades. So they should have absolutely offered him the production. It was his production. But they said, we're reimagining the production. And I put quotes around reimagining, which means that this new director was now going to restage certain scenes, and they may cut a drop here or a drop there or move a chair from stage left to stage right, and therefore it's not his production anymore. So this is really a horrible thing. I find it offensive on so many levels, and we just want to make sure that you all know that when you write your contracts that everything is tight, because we can't trust anyone. You can't trust it. So that's my rant. What do you guys think?
That's a hard one.
Yeah.
That is a hard one. I hear what you're saying. If they want to do a new production, when they say reimagine, You have to kind of ask, what does reimagine mean? Are they putting together a new design team, or are they using the old designs and everything?
Yeah, it's the old designs, the same designs. The designs have not changed at all. The show opened this week, and it's the same. It's his work, and he's really hurt, And it's a shame. And his name's mentioned nowhere. It doesn't even say, new production based on the production by Jose Maria Condemi. It doesn't say it anywhere. So his union is dealing with it now.
Yeah.
And
that's what I was going to say.
This is an issue, to me, it's an issue of intellectual property rights, which there is a clause in the contract about intellectual property rights. So,
Yeah. And it's interesting for us as designers, often in a contract, in my experience, that your right of first refusal is usually tied to one or several other members of the creative team. So for me, it would say something like, you have the right of first refusal for any subsequent production that's directed by the same director or has a scenic design by the same scenic designer. Or in some cases, if it's the same creative team, that you'll be included as well. And the shame here, which you're talking about, is that I feel like a lot of producers that, I can tell you with one show that I did that lasted a long time on Broadway, I won't say the name, that after a while they started to think maybe there's a way to do this cheaper without using these people again, but they couldn't figure out a way to untangle us from each other in a way. So they were like, well, the thing that made it a hit was the direction, but we gave all these designers the right of first refusal for any production that has the same direction. So we can't get out of using them, and we can't recreate this direction without this director. So, it becomes a challenge in many ways, how the producers want to move forward. And in contract negotiation, we often use this term that's in good faith, that for anything else that we haven't put in this contract, we agree to negotiate in good faith.
Yes.
And I find that rarely is the faith good.
Yes. Unfortunately, this is true.
Right. It's almost, I can tell you, there was a producer on Rock of Ages who actually went on Fox News once and complained about me because as a member of the IA, not just as a USA member, but since I was also the programmer for that show, they wanted to do something where they were going to give away a PlayStation or something like that. So they asked me to come in and program some stuff so that during intermission on the video screen, it would say, do this to win a PlayStation. And I went in and I charged for a half day because that's the minimum that I could charge for that amount of work. And then the producer went on Fox News and complained that unions were ruining Broadway because this guy went in and did something that took him 45 minutes and charged for 3 hours. And it didn't make anyone feel good, including the other producers, actually. And so really, and I wasn't doing anything that hadn't been agreed to before. And that's really what makes you feel the most rotten most of the time, is that you think, okay, we've got all this, squared off and signed and everything's been agreed to. And then, these producers and their lawyers find some loophole that undoes everything. And you're like, I thought we were friends. I thought we were all into this because we were trying to create art together. And it makes you feel like exploited.
Yeah.
In a way.
Getting back to the story, the new director didn't know anything about this. They just told her that she was going to reimagine it. And Jose likes this person. And, he made it real clear she is not to blame. She is not to blame. How do you think she feels now that she's learned it all? And the show's about, it's opening in 2 nights or whatever it was. First of all, it's insulting. And this is what he told the producer. He said, if you think so highly of this director, why don't you give her her own production? Don't give her my production. I mean, that's insulting. So, that is a problem. I mean, there's so many things gone. As Larry David says, this is a whole bowl of wrong. It is. It's crazy and it's nuts. And they should be ashamed of themselves for doing this to these amazing artists. All of it. Everybody's hurt by this. So protect yourselves. Double check all your clauses.
And also be aware of what's in your union contract as well if you're signing one.
Right. This apparently this was a union contract, but his manager apparently put it together. And he called it a clerical error that was made. And it was an innocent clerical error. And those innocent clerical errors can come back to bite you. Yeah. An interesting thing happened to me about 5 years ago. There was this big show on Broadway that wasn't so successful. I'm not going to name it. But they were moving it to LA and they called me up. And by the way, the designer on Broadway was an extremely famous designer who I know personally. And they called me up and they said, we're bringing the show to LA. We're using the same costumes, the same sound, the same sets, but we don't want to use the same lighting designer. We want to hire you. Will you do it? And I said, well, that's odd. This is a first run Broadway tour. This doesn't make sense. And I know the designer. So I called the designer up and told him. And he said, he goes, that's fine with me. Screw them. He said, and David, he goes, if you can do the show if you want. He goes, just don't use any of my ideas. So I thought about it for about 4 seconds and called the producer up and said, sorry, I'm not available. I think stuff like that stinks, and I don't want to be a part of it. I don't care what it may do to my career as far as helping my career. I don't care about any of that. I've always believed that the most important thing you have is your integrity, so that when you're on your deathbed, you know that you did the right thing. And I just hate this part of the business. I really do. It's just appalling to me that there are people out there they take advantage of us because most of us are pretty nice and, we'll work extra hours or do things like that. Right. I mean, that's why we have unions, because for generations, producers have taken advantage of artists. So anyway.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is that for at least everyone that I know, we're all doing this because this is what we love. This is our passion.
It's fun.
But at the same time, we also all need to make a living. And so it becomes a big challenge to balance those two things.
All right. Well, beware, everyone. So Steve has our last question.
It comes from Mia in Amsterdam. And she writes, how do I use neutral density gel in my designs? Good question. That is a piece of gel in a swatch book that a lot of people look past. Neutral density. You see it a lot used in photography. The thing about neutral density gel is it blocks light. Now, how can you use it in your design? Well, an easy example, let's say you have a boom focused on stage and you have a bit of a scallop on the floor closest to the boom, and you want to reduce that edge of that light a little bit, but you don't want to cut a shutter. You could add neutral density to that and kind of fade that edge out. Again, you're blocking light. You're not changing the color of anything. I've used it when I've had gobos blasting on a cyc from a wing. And by the time the gobo gets to mid-stage, it's exactly what I want. But when it's closest to the wing, it's a little too bright. So I drop in neutral density, maybe a half or a quarter cut size. I'm working just on the bit of the image that's on the cyc there, not on the image of the gobo on the other side of the stage. And I'm just reducing the amount of light on the image right there. In photography, you can go out and let's say you're trying to do a time-lapse photo at high noon for some reason. Well, it's very difficult to do that without overexposing everything, kind of destroying the depth of field. You can use neutral density in your camera. It's used, you see it if you're trying to blur motion. Sometimes you're on a film set and you'll see neutral density applied to a window to reduce the amount of light coming through the window onto the set itself. So it's a good utility tool whenever you want to manage intensity of light. So there you go. Neutral density filter in 3 minutes or less.
There you go. I have nothing to add to that because I use it a lot, especially like you said, when one light's a little brighter than the other, you don't want to dim down that other light to match the intensity of the first light if we're working with tungsten lights. And why is that? Because the color changes when you dim it down. So to match two lights, you put like a quarter stop in or a half stop in to match the intensity of the light next to it. Then you could dim them both down in the same way. They both 80%. They both change color at that 80%, but one is not as brighter than the other, and that's really important. That's great.
Yeah, get yourself a sheet and experiment.
Yeah,
with
it's
it.
fun.
We have it. It's the same thing. It's the same thing with diffusion. I mean, there must be 50 diffusions made. Get some and find out what they do. See how you can use them in your designs.
Yeah, I would agree. I think getting some samples and playing around with it is the best thing you can do to learn.
Playtime on Light Talk. Well, the rocking sounds of the luminoids tells us that once again you've spent another morning listening to Light Talk. You can hear our show on just about every podcast site out there. Check out our website on lighttalk.org and be sure to follow us on Facebook and subscribe to our podcast. That way you will not miss a second of Light Talk insanity. And if you want to join us and ask us questions live on the show, then send an email to stankay@icloud.com, STANKAYE@icloud.com, and he will give you all the information.
No guarantee is offered regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on this podcast. However,
if you do decide to litigate, the Snoot Group with partners Sparks, Burnout, and Chase Esquire will defend us until our retirement funds are depleted.
Light Talk is written and produced by the Lumen Brothers, coming to you from Long Beach, Washington, D.C., and the Lone Star State.
And be sure to join us next week when we talk about more lighting shenanigans and serve you up a heaping helping of our casserole of nonsense.
Light Talk, broadcasting questionable lumen knowledge and humor around the world.
So we'll see you all next Saturday morning. Bye-bye from Light Talk.
See ya.
See ya.
Lumen Brothers. Light Talk. Light Talk. Light Talk. Lumen Brothers. Light Talk. Nice.